Hi, hello, you come at a perfect time. I was actually rereading On Fairy Stories by Tolkien, which is arguably his most famous essay. So, why don't you take a seat, maybe enjoy a nice hot beverage and a pipe if you can, and we'll just have a talk on this amazing essay. So, this is Tolkien's view of fantasy in general through fairy stories, and also his general view of storytelling. And so I thought that it might be interesting for you to hear more about it if you haven't read it already. I invite you to because it's very enlightening. And so, to start with, he says that fairy stories offer the same value as traditional literature, but it also offers four extra things, which are fantasy, recovery, escape, and consolation. And today I wanted to talk about the first part, fantasy. So, what does Tolkien mean by fantasy? Well, to him, we have to backtrack a little bit and talk about imagination. So, imagination is what he says the what the human mind is capable of, that is forming mental images of things not actually present. And that's what we call imagination. And so that's the first part of the equation. We have images of things that are not in the primary world. And we also have its expression, its final result, which he calls subcreation. And how do you go from one to the other? Well, through art. So he says art is the operative link between imagination and the final result, subcreation. And he continues, and the fact that the images are of things not in the primary world, if that is indeed possible, is a virtue, not a vice. Fantasy, in this sense, is, I think, not a lower but higher form of art. Indeed, the most nearly pure form, and so, when achieved, the most potent. So, fantasy is the most potent form of art because it brings mental images of things that are not real, it's not limited by the primary world, and you bring that into existence, into a sub-creation through art. And this idea of art is in opposition to magic. And this is very key in Tolkien, and when you read The Lord of the Rings, it appears clearly as well. Art he associates with an elvish craft, whereas magic is the tricks used by the enemy. Magic is a way to alter the primary world, whereas art is about subcreation. And so he says, um, the elves can create art particularly well, and so this especially elvish craft, I will, for lack of a less debatable word, call enchantment. Enchantment produces a secondary world into which both designer and spectator can enter, to the satisfaction of the senses while they are inside. But in its purity, it is artistic in desire and purpose. Magic, on the other hand, pretends to produce an alteration in the primary world. See, and this is the mark of the mere magician, which is wholly different from art because magic is centered around greed and power. And I think this is very key, this separation between elvish art and, let's say, magic wielded by magicians. And it reminds me of a passage in The Lord of the Rings that I'm going to read right now, where it's in the mirror of Galadriel, where Frodo and Sam are invited by Galadriel to look into the mirror. And Sam, just a little bit prior, said that he wished to see elvish magic. And so Galadriel addresses Frodo first. She says, "Do you wish to look into the mirror, that is?" Frodo did not answer. "And you?" she said, turning to Sam. For this is what your folk would call magic, I believe, though I do not understand clearly what they mean, and they seem to use the same word of the deceit of the enemy. But this, if you will, is the magic of Galadriel. Did you not say that you wished to see elf magic? I did, said Sam, trembling a little between fear and curiosity. I'll have a peep, lady, if you're willing. And so then they both move on to looking into the mirror, and they see the scouring of the Shire. And I think this is very key to understand Tolkien, the magician who wants to alter the primary world, and the artist, the elvish craft of sub-creating mental images from imagination. And this coercion, this magic coercion, Tolkien also calls the machine, which he opposes to nature and art. And if you read his letters, he expands on that. So I would also invite you to read them if you have the time. And to conclude this part about fantasy, I wanted to read a small passage where he says that I don't know who, but someone called fairy story, breathing a lie through silver. And Tolkien wrote a poem to answer this person. And I'm going to read that to you now. He says, "Dear sir," I said, "although now long estranged, man is not wholly lost, nor wholly changed. Disgraced he may be, yet he is not dethroned, and keeps the rags of lordship once he owned. Man, sub-creator, the refracted light, through whom is splintered from a single white to many hues and endlessly combined in living shapes that move from mind to mind. Though all the crannies of the world be filled with elves and goblins, though we dared to build gods and their houses out of dark and light, and sowed the seed of dragons, 'twas our right, used or misused. That right has not decayed. We make still by the law in which we're made." And so obviously, Tolkien says that we create in the law in which we were made, because we make because we were made. He says, we make in our measure and in our derivative mode because we are made. And not only made, but made in the image and likeness of a maker. I love that part. I think it's such a beautiful sentence. We made because we are made in the image of a maker. That's why we have such an impulse to create, and to create mental images that are not in the primary world, and to bring them into form of existence through art, into a sub-creative expression. And I think that's very beautiful. I can maybe end on a small note here. Tolkien says that fantasy is a natural human activity. He says it certainly does not destroy or even insult reason, and it does not either blunt the appetite for nor obscure the perception of scientific verity. On the contrary, the keener and the clearer is the reason, the better fantasy will it make. I think it's a very interesting point. He says that basically, if we took fantasy only as a way to just get out of the primary world, and it doesn't really, it makes you less into the real world, then fantasy would stop existing, because what would be the point if you can't separate between the real world and the secondary world? Well, there would be no need for fantasy. So actually, the more aware you are of the primary world, of the real world, the more you crave fantasy. And I love how he twists that criticism that is usually addressed fantasy. So I always just want to think about elves and things like that, and you're not really addressing the real problems of this world. And he says, no, on the contrary, it's because we are so aware of those problems that we crave fantasy. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed and learned a little bit. I invite you to pick it up and start reading. You won't be disappointed. Anyway, have a great day. and we'll see each other soon. Bye.